Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm JABEUR and these are the headlines. Azerbaijan says it has liberated 3 more villages and several strategic heights from Armenia during the fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said Army's successful operations are ongoing in the region. Meanwhile, Armenia's Ministry of Defense claims the fighting has slowed down because of international pressure. In Syria, at least 7 people have been killed and dozens wounded in an explosion in the northwestern town of Al-Bab. Locals say the blast occurred when a bomb-laden vehicle blew up in a crowded area in the town. In Kyrgyzstan, the Election Commission says it has annulled the results of Sunday's parliamentary polls after violent protests. 1 protester was killed and over 500 injured in protests against the results, which handed victory to 2 establishment parties. Earlier, the opposition group said they had seized power after taking control of the government buildings in Bishkek. U.S. President Donald Trump has returned to the White House to continue his treatment for coronavirus after a 3-night hospital stay. America's COVID-19 death toll has crossed 210,000 with over 7.4 million cases. India has reported 884 deaths and over 61,000 infections in the past 24 hours, bringing the cases tally to 6.8 million. In Pakistan, 6 people died overnight, taking the death toll to 6,523. Globally, the coronavirus infection tally nears 35.4 million with over 1 million deaths. A trio of British, an American and a German scientist have won the 2020 Nobel Prize for Physics. The Nobel Committee said it awarded Roger Penrose, Reinhard Genzel and Andrea Ghez for their discoveries about black holes. It said their discoveries broke new ground in the study of compact and supermassive objects. And in tennis, Danielle Collins has booked her place in the final 8 of the French Open for the first time in her career. She beat JABEUR by 2-1 in a rain-delayed match. Those were the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Azerbaijan says it has liberated 3 more villages and several strategic heights from Armenia during the fighting over the Nagorno-Karabakh region. Azeri President Ilham Aliyev said the army's successful operations are ongoing in the region. Meanwhile, Armenia's Ministry of Defense claims the fighting has slowed down because of international pressure. Earlier, Turkey said Armenian forces are committing war crimes by targeting civilians. Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu took up the matter in a meeting with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. The NATO chief called for a ceasefire as the death toll from the clashes continues to rise. Kyrgyzstan's Election Commission says it has annulled the results of the Sunday's parliamentary elections after violent protests. 1 protester was killed and over 500 others were injured in protests against the results, which handed victory to 2 establishment parties.
The opposition group said they have seized power after taking control of government buildings in the capital, Bishkek. The opposition appointed their own acting interior minister, head of national security and prosecutor general. President Sooronbay Jeenbekov has called the development a bid by some political forces to seize power illegally. In a statement, Jeenbekov urged his opponents to stop protest, saying he has ordered security forces not to use force. Earlier, the protesters stormed into security headquarters and freed former President Almazbek Atambayev from custody. They also attacked the parliament and took its control. Police used tear gas and water cannons as protesters attempted to enter the government buildings. Biremdik and Makanim Kyrgyzstan parties looked set to dominate the parliament after polls, but Western observers say the election had been marred by vote buying.
In Syria, at least 7 people have been killed and dozens wounded in an explosion in the northwestern town of Al-Bab. Locals say the blast occurred when a bomb-laden vehicle blew up in a crowded area near the town. In March last year, Turkey and Russia agreed to a ceasefire in Syria, but the development failed to restore peace in the country. Syria has been mired in this civil war since 2012. The United Nations says the conflict has killed nearly 400,000 people and displaced over 6.6 million. U.S. envoy Zalmay Khalilzad says Afghans should not let the opportunity for peace slip away. Khalilzad and General Austin S. Miller met with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and the Taliban leadership in Qatar. In a series of tweets, Khalilzad said violence in the country is too high and too many Afghans are dying. He said the U.S. is pressing for a significant reduction in the violence that will lead to a permanent and comprehensive ceasefire. The Afghan president's spokesman said both the sides stressed on availing the peace opportunity for ending the war. Meanwhile, the Taliban spokesman, Dr. Mohammad Naeem, said the two sides discussed the implementation of the Doha deal. U.S. President Donald Trump has returned to the White House to continue his treatment for coronavirus after a 3-night hospital stay. Over in India, another 884 people have died and over 61,000 tested positive in the past 24 hours. Globally, the coronavirus infection tally has crossed 35.4 million with over 1 million deaths. More in this report.
The new coronavirus continues to take thousands of lives and infect over hundreds of thousands every day. The outbreak is most aggressive in the US, India and Brazil, which account for half of global deaths and cases. America's New York State is imposing new restrictions in virus hotspots as clusters re-emerge. The country's death toll has crossed 210,000 with over 7.4 million cases. But President Trump, after returning from hospital, urged all Americans not to confine themselves to their homes.
And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines, all developed recently. And you're going to beat it. I didn't feel so good. And 2 days ago, I could have left 2 days ago. 2 days ago, I felt great, like better than I have in a long time. I said just recently, better than 20 years ago. Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives.
Meanwhile, in Europe, an increase in the number of hospitalizations and deaths is prompting governments to impose more restrictions. The UK has recorded over 12,000 new coronavirus cases, almost double the daily rate at which new cases were running last week. Amid rising cases, Ireland's Prime Minister Michael Martin has refused to follow the advice of health chief to impose a lockdown. In Australia, cases have been rising again in Victoria, the country's virus hotspot.
There are 216 active cases of coronavirus in Victoria. That's 15 new cases since my update yesterday. 8 of those 15 are linked to known outbreaks and complex cases. 7 are under investigation by our public health team. 2 cases were reclassified. There have now been 807 deaths due to this global pandemic. I'm sad to report that is an increase of 1 since yesterday.
In Southeast Asia, the virus still paints a grim picture as India cases tally exceeds 6.8 million with over 102,000 deaths. In Iran, nearly all of the country has been put on red alert as the infections and fatalities have hit record levels. In Malaysia, Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin has quarantined himself for 14 days after his cabinet minister tested positive for the virus.
In Pakistan, 6 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19 during the last 24 hours, which raises the death toll to 6,523. The Health Ministry says 467 people tested positive in a day. The ministry said there are 8,588 total active cases in the country. It said out of over 315,000 cases, more than 300,000 have recovered so far. The ministry said over 138,000 cases have been detected in Sindh province, while over 100,000 reported in Punjab so far. The National Command and Operations Centre says 86 people across the country are on ventilators. There are no COVID-19 patients on ventilators in Balochistan and Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Israeli forces have shot dead a Palestinian youth in the occupied West Bank's Tulkarem city. Palestine's media says the young man bled to death while lying on the road after sustaining wounds from the gunfire. The media said after the incident, Israeli soldiers set up a checkpoint at the entrance of the town and carried out aggressive raids. A large number of Israel's infantry troops are deployed in the farmlands surrounding the nearby town. Earlier, Israel also carried out airstrikes against a Hamas site in the Gaza Strip. Israel's military spokesperson said the strike was a retaliation to a rocket fired from Gaza. Ankara has accused Ottawa of following a policy of double standards after Canada suspended drones exports to Turkey. In a statement, the foreign ministry said there is no explanation of blocking defense equipment exports to a NATO ally, which Canada does not see any harm in exporting arms to countries that have military involvement in Yemen crisis. It said Ottawa should act without being influenced by those opposed to Ankara. Earlier, Canada halted the export of drone technology to Turkey after claims of its use by Azeri forces in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. Foreign Minister François-Philippe Champagne has said in line with Canada's export control regime, Ottawa has suspended the relevant permits to Turkey. Turkey says it supports NATO's initiative to reduce Eastern Mediterranean tensions despite Greece's negative behavior. The NATO allies Ankara and Athens have been at odds over drilling claims in rich waters. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan received NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg in Ankara. Turkey's communications directorate quoted Erdogan as saying Ankara respects the rights and interests of both itself and its NATO allies. The president said Turkey expects the same from its allies. In a tweet, Stoltenberg said the two sides had a good discussion on a range of security issues, including deconfliction mechanism. Meanwhile, the EU has welcomed the return of a Turkish drill ship to a port. A European Union spokesperson said the move will help ease tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged the world powers to keep working towards a lasting ceasefire in Libya. In a virtual meeting co-hosted by the United Nations and Germany, Guterres called for backing a UN arms embargo against Libya. He said the violations of the embargo are a scandal and called into question the commitment to peace of all involved. Guterres said peace efforts must be supported not only in words but in actions as well. While German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas expressed hope the conflict in Libya can now be resolved. He said there has been a recent shift in thinking from military to political logic. The summit comes amid international pressure on Libya's warring sides to hold off attack on the strategic city of Sirte. Mali's interim prime minister has announced a new cabinet after the coup that took place in the West African country in August. The state media said the transitional cabinet includes 21 civilians and 4 military officers in key positions. It's the 3 influential members of the military that toppled the previous government have also been given important posts. Colonel Sadio Kamara has been appointed as the defense minister and Colonel Modibo Kone is given the post of security and civil protections. Meanwhile, Colonel Major Ismail Wago, who announced the coup, will take oath as the Minister of National Reconciliation. More stories to follow right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Tokyo says the US and Japan believe the situation in Asia-Pacific region is increasingly severe. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is in Tokyo for a Quad meeting with his Japanese, Australian and Indian counterparts. Ahead of the meeting, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said Japan has been pushing hard for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Suga said the international community has started understanding that this is a vision for regional peace and stability. Creation of a free and open Indo-Pacific initiative focused on economic and security cooperation is the main agenda of the Quad meet. Earlier, Pompeo hailed new Japanese Prime Minister Suga as a force for good. The U.S. Secretary of State said he believes Suga will work to strengthen the relationship between Washington and Tokyo. China, on behalf of 26 countries, has rebuked the U.S. and Western countries for human rights violations. At the UN General Assembly, China's envoy Zhang Jun called for an immediate and complete lifting of sanctions against developing countries. Speaking at the general debate of the Third Committee of the UNGA, Zhang said COVID-19 pandemic has caused severe impact on all the countries, especially the developing ones. The envoy said, but unilateral sanctions amid such crises impede the realization of social and economic development. He said such coercive measures violate the principles of the UN Charter and international law. The Chinese envoy also expressed grave concern on racial discrimination.
20 years after the adoption of the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, instances like the death of George Floyd and the shooting of Jacob Blake continue to take place, and vulnerable people continue to suffer or lose their lives to racism and police brutality. Such instances are a reminder that chronic and deep-rooted social discrimination, police brutality, and social inequality still exist.
Jammu and Kashmir People's League is celebrating its 46th Foundation Day today. At a conference in Islamabad, the All-Party Hurriyat Conference leaders slammed India's inhumane and illegal occupation of Kashmir. The Kashmiri freedom leaders called on the civilized world to deliver the UN's promise of Kashmiris' right to self-determination. Azad Jammu and Kashmir's former president Sardar Yaqub Khan said it is time for the international community and rights bodies to raise their voice for the Kashmiris oppressed by Indian occupied forces.
Since a long time we are waiting for international communities to at least to understand, and they must understand because they should realize that what is going on over there. So I think we are here today to discuss regarding this matter, and UN is supposed to be very much involved in this case because UN resolution is there, and so far international community is not going to be very concerned with the Kashmir issue.
It has been over a year since India revoked Kashmir's UN-recognized status and imposed a curfew and communications blackout in the valley. Now moving on, Washington says important progress has been made in the U.S.-Russia nuclear arms control negotiations held in Finland. This comes as U.S. Presidential Envoy for Arms Control Marshall Billingsley met Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov in Helsinki. In a tweet, Billingsley thanked Finland's President Sauli Niinistö for hosting the pivotal dialogue. The Russian Foreign Ministry said the two representatives discussed the prospects of cooperation in this sphere of arms control. Moscow and Washington have been trying to agree on terms to extend the arms control New START treaty that expires in February 2021. The New START is the only treaty that regulates arms control between the two countries, including nuclear weapons. Russia has welcomed the recently signed JABEUR peace agreement between Sudan's government and the rebel groups. In a statement, the Russian Foreign Ministry said the peace deal is an important step towards national reconciliation in Sudan. The statement also underscored the role played by Sudan's President Salva Kiir in facilitating the peace talks. The JABEUR peace agreement addresses issues ranging from military affairs to the return of refugees, but demonstrators have blocked the country's southern seaport, rejecting the peace deal. The protesters say the deal serves foreign interests and ignores the concerns of the locals. Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny says Russian agencies poisoned him as a threat ahead of next year's parliamentary elections. In an interview, Navalny said he believes Russian intelligence services had poisoned him with a rare nerve agent. The Kremlin critic said he does not know how a Novichok nerve agent had got into his system. Navalny said he feels better, but complete recovery can take 2 more months. The Kremlin denies any role in Navalny's poisoning. Earlier, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held a telephonic conversation with his French counterpart Jean-Yves Le Drian. Lavrov said any attempts to politicize the alleged poisoning of Russian opposition figure are unacceptable. A trio of British, an American and a German scientists have won the 2020 Nobel Prize for Physics. The Nobel Committee said it awarded Roger Penrose, Reinhard Genzel and Andrea Ghez for their discoveries about the black holes. Secretary General for the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences, Göran Hansson, said the recipients' work has helped the revelation of the darkest secrets of the universe. British physicist Penrose has been rewarded for discovering that black holes are a robust prediction of the general theory of relativity. American astronomer Ghez and German astrophysicist Genzel were jointly awarded. They made a novel discovery of a supermassive compact object at the center of our galaxy. Nobel Prize winners are given a Nobel diploma, medal and prize money of more than $1.1 million. 5 people have died after tropical storm Gamma lashed southeastern Mexico. The storm smashed the Yucatan Peninsula's coast with near hurricane-force winds. Gamma left behind a trail of destruction, forcing thousands to evacuate. In southern Chiapas state, a landslide buried 4 people after heavy rains. In the Tabasco state, a person drowned while trying to cross an overflowing river. Authorities said Gamma has left more than 600,000 people affected in Mexico's Gulf Coast and flooded several homes. According to the U.S. National Hurricane Center, Gamma is the 24th storm of the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season. At least 4 people have died in floods and heavy rain in southern France. A spokeswoman for Alpes-Maritimes Prefecture said up to 18 people are missing. Authorities said the missing include 2 firemen whose vehicle was carried away by a swollen river. Southern France has been lashed with torrential rain over the weekend. This has led to swollen rivers sweeping away houses, bridges and parts of roads. Storm Alex has ravaged several villages around the city of Nice on the French Riviera. Earlier, Nice Mayor Christian Estrosi called it the worst flooding disaster in the area for more than a century. Afghanistan cricket team's top-order batsman Najib Tarakai has died from injuries following a road accident. The Afghanistan Cricket Board said the 29-year-old cricketer was critically injured in an accident on Friday. In a tweet, the Cricket Board said it mourns the heartbreaking and grievous loss of its aggressive opening batsman and a very fine human being. The batsman made his international debut in 2014 T20 World Cup. Tarakai had featured in 1 T20 international and 12 one-day internationals for Afghanistan, primarily as an opening batsman. The International Monetary Fund has approved new aid for 28 of the world's poorest countries amid the coronavirus pandemic. The grants of an estimated total amount of $959 million can be provided for a 2-year period. The funding is intended to help the countries cover their debt repayments to the IMF for the next 6 months. The 28 countries receiving the aid include Afghanistan, Nepal, Tajikistan, and most of the African countries. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has repeatedly called for debt relief for poorer countries. The European Union says it wants a trade deal with Britain but cannot rule out the prospects of a no deal. Speaking to the Parliament, Commission's Vice President Maroš Šefčovič said the UK's internal market bill proposal breaches the withdrawal agreement. He said the proposed draft is a heavy blow to the British signature and reliability. Šefčovič said the full and timely implementation of the withdrawal agreement is simply non-negotiable. He said if the agreement is reached, both parties will have to ensure timely ratification of the deal. The Vice President said EU's chief negotiator Michel Barnier and his team have the bloc's full support. European stocks have edged lower with markets reacting to the second wave of COVID-19 getting stronger in Europe. The pan-European stock 600 has dipped under the flat line. London's FTSE shed over 0.5%, while Italy's FTSE MIB also slipped. Frankfurt's DAX and Paris's CAC 40 dropped marginally. Earlier Asian markets edged up with all bourses in positive territory. American Danielle Collins has booked her place in the final 8 of the French Open for the first time in her career. She beat Tunisia's own JABEUR by 2-1 in a rain-delayed encounter. JABEUR was the first Arab woman to reach the Roland Garros last 16 by beating 8th seed Ariana Sabalenka. Unseeded Collins will next face compatriot Sofia Kenin on Wednesday. Collins has won all 3 of her previous matches against compatriot Kenin. In a previous match, Kenin came back from 1 set down to beat Frenchwoman Fiona Ferro. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.